Hello and welcome to box 16 of Hoop Club. We are doing a collaboration project with Donna Wilson this month. Donna is one of my favourite artist designers. I just love her work. I just think it's so kind of iconic and recognisable and so different, and I love that she uses traditional techniques and everything feels and is very handmade and traditional. So we are stitching 2 hoops this month, so we've got lots to keep you busy, and I'm going to go through all the basics of the kit. So if you've never stitched a hoop before, then I'm going to show you what to do, and then we'll just go into detail on some of the stitches that we use. So these are the 2 kits we're stitching. So we've got Scamp the Dog, and then this Blah 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 kit. So both quite simple. This one has 4 stitches, this one just uses 1 stitch. I'm going to take you through all of those and show you how to do them. So the first job is to get our fabric in our hoop. So apologies for the crease. You would just give your fabric a quick iron, but I am trying to get this done on the last day before I leave for holiday, so I'm cutting that as a corner. Apologies. So what you want to do, this one is quite easy to line up because it's got quite the shape, the design goes right to the edges, but you put your smaller hoop on a table or a surface, and then you try and get the fabric, the design central, and then you push on your bigger hoop, and then you might want to just pull it to try and get it central. And then you tighten the screw and then pull the fabric. So it's a gentle process. You can kind of see on this one, if you pull the fabric too vigorously, you're going to warp the design. So it is really quite a slow process of very gently tugging at the edges and then tightening the screw again, and then very gently tugging at the edges so that we get a really lovely tight drum-like finish, but you haven't distorted the shape of the design. So that is how you get your fabric in your hoop. Next job is to thread our needle. Now embroidery thread comes in lengths of 6 smaller strands, so each big strand is made up of 6 smaller strands, which you'll be able to see as I'm kind of splitting it there. So to stitch, we're going to start with the Blah 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 kit, and to stitch this kit you need 3 strands. So to split the thread, we're going to just gently pull it apart. This is a length of about 40 to 50 centimetres, but if you go quite slowly, you should avoid getting in a tangle. So I've split my thread, and now I'm going to thread my needle, and you want a 10 centimetre or so tail. Don't be tempted to tighten a double knot, lots of people do that, and then tie a knot at this one end. So we are ready to stitch our Blah 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 kit. So the stitch we're using for this one is split back stitch. So this gives you a really lovely finish. It's almost like a chain stitch. And the way you work it is stitch your first stitch, probably about 2 to 3 millimeters long. And your second stitch, you want to come at the fabric about 1.5 2 millimeters along, because you're going to be splitting your first stitch in half with this next stitch. So just go right through the middle of that first stitch, and then again 1.5 2 millimeters, pull your thread through and split your previous stitch. So why we're using this one and not just a normal back stitch is that it gives you a thicker line. So for designs like this, it looks really nice and it gives us the right thickness of line, but also you can go really nicely along curves with this stitch, because you can kind of control it a little bit more, because every time you go back down through a stitch you can kind of slightly move that stitch to where you want it to be. So you kind of, this stitch I think gives you a bit more accuracy when you go around curves, which is why it's really good for lettering. The one exception to that is when you are doing a really sharp corner, which I am about to do. So here you'll see I can't go back down the middle of my last stitch, otherwise that would take me kind of over there, and I want to keep the stitch up here. So when you're going around sharp corners, you just revert to a normal back stitch to make sure you can get that corner, and then you would just resume. Now that we're back onto a nice curve, you just resume the split back stitch and go back through. So that's the only exception, is for those sharp angled. So that's going to count, that's going to come into play when you do the top of these L's, the top of the H's, and possibly sometimes around this kind of join. But that is, let me just do a few more. That is basically the split back stitch. It's so easy, but it looks so good. And this is how we're stitching up the whole of this design. So you can master this stitch and then just really enjoy the mindfulness that comes with stitching and the satisfaction that comes with going from this to this. It is so satisfying. So that's our first kit. The second kit is this little dog character. So we are using a split back stitch again for the mouth, the nose, these bits. So I won't show you that again. That is the same. We're using 3 strands to do a split back stitch. The next stitch we're going to do is this running stitch, which is just one really simple stitch, and then you move from stitch to stitch. I'm going to show you that. Then the next stitch is a satin stitch, which we use on the eye and on the nose, and then we're doing some little French knots as well. So I'm going to show you how to do all of those stitches. So I've split my thread again, so we're using 3 strands again for this project. I'm going to show you the running stitch to start with. So ignore that I've stitched this sample in a slightly different colour. I'm just using this to show you the technique. So the running stitch, you are very simply coming up at the start of one of the dashes and then going back down. So what we then go on to like the next one. So what I'm asking you to do here is what I normally ask you not to do, which is jump from section to section with your thread, because sometimes it means you can kind of see your thread behind the fabric if you do that. So kind of best practice is to, if you can, stitch a section and then tie a knot before you move on. But because that would take a long time, I don't think anyone's got the patience to tie a knot after each one of these little stitches. So we're breaking the rules and we are just going to stitch a little cluster of running stitches, and then you actually can't see the thread behind it. I think if you look at that one, you can't see it, can you? So it's fine. The fabric you use is quite thick. So that is the running stitch. So just carry on, just try and go along to the next one so that you're not dragging your thread too far. But they're easy, aren't they? So that's the running stitch. Now I'm going to show you the French knots. I'm zooming right in so that you can see. Some people struggle with these, but the key is getting the thread to go around your needle in the right direction, and then you should be fine. So we're bringing our thread up, and it is easier to do this if you've got an embroidery stand or you're laying it on the table, because you kind of need both hands. And you pull your thread with your left hand, place your needle on that thread, and we're going to go round once, and then we're going to put the needle back through the hole we came up at, pulling this left hand tail taut and all the way through. and that should give us a little knot. That's our first knot. So with French knots you can choose how many times you go around the needle. Because we want quite a small knot, we're just going around once, but if you want bigger knots you go around 2 or 3 times. So we're going round once, back down, pulling that tight. So the key, what clicked for me with French knots was getting clear in my head which way round the needle I was winding my thread, and then they're just easy to me now. So pull that thread tight, put your needle on the thread, excuse me, wrap it around once and then back down. So that is how you complete the French knots for his little whiskers. Now the last stitch to show you is satin stitch. So I've got satin stitch on the nose and the eye. So this outline of the eye is done in split back stitch. We've already shown you how to do that. I'm just going to show you how to do the satin stitch here. So come up to your fabric and you go back down. You probably will have already, I would stitch the back stitch first actually, don't do it the way I'm showing you. And then satin stitch is a case of building up a kind of panel or row of stitches that get thicker and thicker and thicker as you fill in the space. So I would start doing a few stitches and then I go back and start filling in the gaps until you've completely filled the shape that you want to fill. So it's very simple. This is a really simple shape to fill as well. So just keep going back, left to right on this one, filling in the eye with stitches. So I haven't finished that. I would keep going on that one until you get it lovely and thick and satiny. So the nose is exactly the same principle, but we're going a different direction. So we're doing slightly diagonal stitches, but exactly the same principle. We haven't lined this one with a back stitch just because it's quite a small area. But that is how you complete all of the stitches on that kit. And now I just want to show you how you finish off the back. So you will have been provided with some cardboard discs and some wadding, and what you do is trim the edges. I would trim that so it's around 2 to 3 centimetres, something like that. You don't want loads of fabric in the back of your hoop, it will just make it bulky. So trim your fabric like that all the way around, and then cut your wadding to the size of your backing disc. Put the wadding in the back of the hoop and fold over your fabric, and then you push in the wooden disc. So the disc just goes in, push down the edges, and you have a lovely cushioned, padded, finished hoop. That is how quick and easy it is to finish our hoops. I love it. So I think that's everything for this month's kit. It's a really simple one, so you can sit and watch Christmas TV and stitch these 2 hoops and be very proud of yourself once you've done it. See you next month.